This time we have defensive coordinator Zac Alley. Questions for Coach Alley, Greg?
So, Zach, start with when you're coaching. I'm sure there's an inclination to scream and yell when things go badly, but you also don't want to crush spirit and confidence. So, how do you balance that?
Yeah, I think there's it depends on the guys you have. You always want to build guys up throughout the week, particularly after a bad performance on a game. That show them what went wrong, try and fix those things, and create buy-in to what you're going towards. Try and show them the good things, and when they were good, and then show them the bad when they were bad. And then, I think throughout the week, as you get back to game day, you want to build their confidence back, and try and make the game enjoyable again.
Are you a yeller during game time? How do you handle situations like, Saturday when there were some busts?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely loud. I yell, but I yell in practice too. So I always say, whoever you are, if you're that guy on Tuesday, be that guy on Saturday. Don't show up and yell on Saturday if you don't yell Tuesday, and vice versa. So try and be consistent from practice to the game.
Jordan Walker was talking about how the mistakes that are made during the games, when you guys are watching film back from practice, he's not seeing them as much. He thinks practice has been better than the game, mistake-wise. Is that an assessment that you would agree with? And then why do you think that if practices are going well and not making as many mistakes in practice, that then they're happening in games?
Yeah, I know we show him the plays that we got in the game that we did the exact thing to the exact call in practice, which is what we try and accomplish. I guess that's the best you can do as a coach, is set them up for exactly what you get. And I think just I've been trying to emphasize that, taking what's been at practice and then making it happen in the game. And I think we feel like right now we got to be perfect all the time when we get to games. And, so there's a little bit of not playing free, that comes with that kind of paralyzation. And just trusting that, if I do my job and go to my spot, that it's going to come to me, particularly if we know what the play is that's coming beforehand. So, which did happen a couple times, and we still gave up a touchdown, and so that's kind of disappointing. But I'm working through it with the coaches the same way. It's on us at the end of the day, of trying to get guys, to understand and be able to process fast and know where to go, because they are matching up the looks, from practice to the game. So the translation has got to be there, and I think that just comes from confidence.
UCF's first two touchdowns, fourth down, big deep passes. First one seemed like because the quarterback was able to buy some time. Was the second one break down something different?
Yeah, the first one, we rep that mesh to that same call all week. We don't take him on the scramble. The middle field player runs downhill and tries to come get the quarterback as the deep third in the middle, which is very much a no, something you can't do. And, a young guy, a freshman that's in there that's trying to learn to play. And, that's a mistake I'm sure he'll remember and won't make next week. And then, the second one, we're in just basic weak cover 3, and we don't run to the post. We get caught up, and no real explanation there other than, we didn't do our job.
What you talked about, and Rich has talked about not making the same mistakes again and again. Doesn't seem like that's been the case. Seems like there's been some different things the past 2 or 3 weeks. You mentioned tackling, some other things. So in a way, is that better as a coach, that you're like, hey, we fixed this a little bit, now we got to move on to that?
It's definitely better than making the same thing over and over again, but, I'd like to clean them up in general. Just too many. You have an opportunity on both those fourth downs where, it's things that we're in good spots if we play the call the right way, and, we don't, and you give up 2 scores. You go into halftime with no points given up, you feel a whole lot different. But their teams are willing to go on fourth down on us. I think we've seen the most fourth down attempts in the country to this point. So that's something we got to work on, because on third down we're pretty good, and then on fourth down we've not been up to the standard of what we need to be.
What do you see in Josh Hoover? He's one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12.
Yeah, it looks like a first-round draft pick. He puts the ball outside. I want to say he's like one of 2 quarterbacks coming back that had 3,500 yards last year that stayed with their team. I think everybody else transferred. When you watch him, and he does it. I mean, there's throws where it is covered and the guy's one-on-one, and it is put 2 inches above the fingers of the defender and they catch it for 50 yards. And it's not like one time that happens. It's every single game. They find, ways to get one-on-ones and attack guys down the field and make those plays. So, I think he's a baller, and we got a big challenge in front of us with just his ability to get the ball out.
Can you talk a little bit, Coach Rodriguez talked a little bit about how, some of the culture might not have been as firmly implemented as he thought. You talked last night about, some of the lack of intensity and identity on his radio show. Do you see any of that as well within the program, like areas where like maybe the culture didn't quite get where it was, maybe like what he said, some evaluations were missed? And how do you address that still in the season to try to turn this around and get some wins? Like he said, there's a lot of football left to be played.
Yeah, I do feel that. You just watch the amount of loafs and things that happened in the game. I called it out right on the first series. Second play of the game, we got 6 guys not running the ball. And, when you replace 71 guys, nobody's been around us for an extended period of time. And so, you're working every single day for guys who, when you get a freshman in, a lot of times that guy, he's bought into kind of how you're the only voice he's ever heard, and so he understands, and that's what he gets built into as a senior. You get a guy that's maybe been at 3 or 4 different programs. He's heard a lot of different things. And so you're trying to create buy-in from those guys all the time. And obviously losing doesn't help that, but the key for us is just how can we continue to hold things to a standard of how we're going to do what we do. And, once we realize sometimes guys don't understand what that actually looks like. They think they're playing hard and they're not. They think they're being physical, but they're not. And you try and show them and call them out and give them good examples of what it looks like to continue to establish, what the culture needs to be moving forward. And same thing this week. We're trying to do it today, try and do it yesterday. And we encourage the leaders within the rooms to, the guys who are doing it and are setting the example, man, everybody else got to come along because football is the greatest game in the world because it takes all 11 guys every play. And if one guy's not doing what he's supposed to do, you give up a big play touchdown. And so the challenge is the consistency of performance that leads to that, mindset of belief.
How difficult is what Curtis Jones is trying to do? Young guy playing some bandit at some point, nickel at another point. How difficult is that for a young player, and how's he done it?
I think he's done a pretty good job. Just like anybody, he's going to make a mistake here or there. But Kurt's a very versatile athlete, and he's a guy that, as we've had some different injuries and different structures we've needed to play, he's been able to move around to give us that kind of presence. Our Sam and our bandit are fairly similar as far as what we ask him to do. But obviously the last couple games we've needed him at Sam, and so we've played him out there to give us some depth and all, throughout the last couple games. So I think he's done a really good job, and he just continues to get better every single game.
3 games in, you guys were great against Zac's, and I don't think have one since then too. Probably not as good as the Heights, but certainly better than what you've been the last couple of games. Any explanation for how that slid like it has?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. One, you play better people, that's always going to be harder. 2, we get right to the point of contact in the quarterback a lot of times. The ball's coming out because the coverage isn't where it's supposed to be. And they both relate. You have to be in coverage in the spots you're supposed to, so the ball can't get thrown, and then you have to get off the rock and go get the quarterback. And I challenged the guys on Saturday with it. I know Coach Green and Coach Castile did too. That we're not going when we have an opportunity. We've got to freaking go and force the quarterback into bad situations and force the ball out or get the sack. And we've had some bang opportunities there, even with blitzes, where we're just right to the point and it's, open in the back end. So he gets the ball off or he throws it away. And then a couple of them, we've got wide open gaps and free runners and we got to finish the play when we're in the backfield because we've missed quite a few of those.
Is perception, I guess, but confidence for guys, because you guys are complex at what you do and it's a lot to execute and to remember. Is that a cause for some of maybe the shortcomings, and kind of as a coordinator, can you build in confidence by focusing on what they're really, really good at, what they're comfortable doing? Well, maybe that gets too far away from what you want to do to be effective.
Yeah, the last couple of weeks we've been very simple comparatively to maybe what we would do, in the first couple games, and some of the ones in the middle there we've cut down a lot of things, and as Coach Rod said, we're trying to simplify and be able to execute better, and you see some of that, but it's not consistent enough, and so I keep trying to cut more stuff, to get us to play something that we're comfortable in, and we feel like we can play fast and physical in, but. I think it's a challenge every week of you want enough to be able to have answers to problems that come up in the game, but not enough that the guys can't execute the calls.
Zach, Rich mentioned how he's going to go through evaluating everything from now until the end of the season with 5 games remaining. From a defense perspective, when you start evaluating players, what are you going to start looking at from now until the end of the regular season?
Yeah, I think both guys on and off the team, it's who can help you win. You like long, fast, athletic dudes. That always helps. And that's what we're looking for all the time. And I want to see the guys that from the team that are coming back that will be here. Who stands up when things are hard and there's adversity. Who leads, who's willing to come in here when it's tough. And who are the guys that don't want to do that. And I'm constantly evaluating that and know. Hey, all right, this is a guy we feel like we can count on in the future, or maybe this is a guy that we can't.
Coach Rodriguez also talked about, in retrospect now, even from the offseason, he can admit maybe there was some misevaluation of players just in general. From a defensive perspective, is that something you can look back on? Like, would you agree with that assessment that maybe there was some misevaluation?
Yeah, I think for sure. I think anytime you're losing, that's something that you got to look at and say, okay, where did we miss? Where are some things that, hey, we thought this guy was going to be this and he's not. And, on the flip side, some guys maybe you weren't as confident in that have done better things than you thought they would do. But, I think across the board, we've had to self-evaluate and, say, hey, I brought everybody here. I picked everyone on defense that Coach Rodriguez went and looked at. And so you own that as a coach, and I do think there were probably some missed things that we did, and we're getting used to the new world too. You used to recruit a guy and you knew him for a year and a half. Our 26s we signed here in a couple, 6 weeks or whatever it is. I mean, shoot, I started recruiting them in January, and some of them before that, even before I got here. But you get to know their families, who they are, how they handle things. You go to games and practices and see it. And in the portal, they land at 8 a.m. in the morning. You have about 6 hours. They leave at 4 o'clock, and it's yes, no. And sometimes, if you're not the first guy in on the conversation, you don't even get a visit. So I do think it's harder now than it has been because you don't have the extended period of time to get to know guys. And in a year like last year, where I think walking in the door, even after signing the freshmen, we were 26 scholarships down on defense walking in. That's a lot of guys with speed dating to figure out, how they fit and where they go. I think that'll be, as we move forward, something that's a little bit easier because we've been established and we're here.
Long touchdown play or long breakaways run, whatever it might be. A lot of times you can sit there and see what happens, this tackle, or a guy goes for an interception and doesn't get the ball, or a great offensive play. But a guy runs 83 yards through the middle, nobody near him, until he's 50 yards downfield. Is that a total breakdown on defense? Is it a great offensive call? Is it a combination? What's the anatomy of something like that?
I know the ones we had this week, and we didn't fit the A gap with a Mike linebacker, and that's going to be a hard day anytime you do it. The middle of the defense has to be secure. And so you got to play physical and attack guys and knock people backwards and, be able to make plays, when those happen in the moment. And then, the ability to run them down, from a post safety or somebody that's a second level defender. It takes a bad angle, and next thing you know, it's out for 50. And, that happened twice to us in the game where we get cracked, we don't replace, the corner's too wide, and, he doesn't go in there and make the tackle, and then, it's run out of bounds 50 yards later, and then, you get the same, very similar situation later on in the game, and, you don't fit into your gap, and the ball's going to spike on you every time, and so it's consistency to do your job that leads to that.
Plays like that more often, defensive breakdown than a great offensive effort?
Most of the time, I think, usually a wide open guy or a complete misfit is, easier on a big play touchdown. Everybody knows the competitive play where they throw it down the sideline, it's bang, bang, they make a catch. That happens, but certainly the big plays most of the time are due to defensive mistakes.
Cole Rush rush game this week. Can you just talk a little bit about what you've learned about West Virginia and its coal mining history and industry, and like what it means to you to be able to go out there as a part of this special game and represent that?
I'm excited. I've met quite a few guys, even guys on our team whose dads are coal miners. Obviously that's a tradition, and as far as the coal rush game, honoring those, the sacrifice, the commitment that those men and women make to go down and do a job that, it's tough. And I've been in a couple of the coal mines here. We did it back in the spring, and I was like, I don't know how they come down here every day. Just impressive the history and tradition of that here, and I also like pepperoni rolls.
Zach, their passing game, obviously Hoover, all the eyes on him, but their losses, they haven't been able to run the ball too. Sure, you want to stop the passing game, but how much do you have to succeed against the run?
You have to eliminate it. I think they rushed for 250 last game against Baylor. And so, you start to, when you give the runs up, now the passes become easy because you've got to play, get up in there and try and stop the run, primarily. And then, they pull the ball out and throw the RPOs. Now it becomes tougher because, you're not knocking back and preventing the run game from happening. So those apex defenders feel like they got to be tighter and more in the run when in reality, that's going to lead to more passing opportunities.
Okay, thank you very much, Coach.
Yep.